So the story of Jimmy Graham has been very exciting recently. I mean, the trajectory his career has been taking, but we have just gotten a very scary update in regards to Jimmy Graham. And we're going to get that all to you in a sec. Before we get to the content, we're doing a massive Madden 24 giveaway. We're posting codes on my Instagram story at the Flight Mike, on my Snapchat story, Flight Mike Snap, and we're also running a giveaway on Twitter, and the giveaway tweet is in the description down below. Now that we get all that out of the way, break! Ladies and gentlemen, the NFL is finally back.
That's impossible!
But I'm gonna admit, the preseason is boring as I mean, when the second stringers and third stringers come out, your boy does tend to fall asleep a little bit. But I found a way to make the preseason all the more interesting. Because ladies and gentlemen, we are back! Posting prize picks on the days that there are significant preseason games, starting from the Hall of Fame game all the way to the Super Bowl. Your boy is going to be making picks on his Instagram story. The picks are free. All you have to do is follow me on Instagram to get them. And if you haven't signed up for prize picks, right now when you use my promo code Mikerophone, you'll double your deposit up to $100. And thank you, Prize Picks, for the sponsorship. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? I believe this is our third upload in a 24-hour span between the Robert Quinn arrest and then the Shannon Sharpe update. And now we have this story, which in of its own right is very bizarre. Coming to you straight from Costa Rica, Jimmy Graham is a household name if you're a New Orleans Saints fan. I mean, he has been in the NFL for a very long time. He made his debut in the NFL in 2010, but he really started to become a dominant presence in the NFL from 2011 and on, cementing himself as Drew Brees' favorite target from the year 2011 to 2014. And I would say in some ways, Jimmy Graham revolutionized the tight end position, because before there was receiving tight ends, don't get me wrong, like Shannon Sharpe and Tony Gonzalez, but we haven't seen a tight end like Jimmy Graham before in NFL history, primarily because it seemed like he was more of a wide receiver than a tight end. He didn't necessarily have the greatest skill set whenever it came to the running game. It wasn't like he was terrible, but as far as tight ends go, he is the very first tight end whose receiving skill set far surpassed his abilities as a blocking tight end. And as a result, you could say a brand new genre of tight end evolved from Jimmy Graham. Although obviously if you're a tight end, you want to ideally be a good run blocker, a good pass blocker, and a good receiver. But to give you an idea of how prolific Jimmy Graham was, in 2011 with the New Orleans Saints, he was one reception shy of 100 receptions for over 1,300 passing yards, 11 touchdowns, and 13.2 yards per reception. In 2012, he was 18 yards shy of a 1,000-yard receiving season, but still had 9 touchdowns on the year. And in 2013, he had his best season to date, 16 touchdowns for over 1,200 receiving yards and 86 receptions. Jimmy Graham experienced the most success in his career with the New Orleans Saints. There's no doubt about that. And then in March of 2015, the Saints did something that bothered Drew Brees a little bit by trading Jimmy Graham to the Seattle Seahawks for center Max Unger and a first-round pick in the 2015 NFL Draft. Jimmy Graham was brought in to make Russell Wilson's life a little easier, but he wasn't necessarily the tight end he once was. Well, in his first year in 11 games, he still had the same yards per reception average, but he only brought in 605 yards receiving. 2016 was his best year with the Seattle Seahawks, over 900 yards receiving and 65 receptions and 6 touchdowns. And then in 2017, he kind of turned back the clock by establishing himself as a premier red zone threat for the Seahawks by bringing in 10 touchdowns. Following his tenure with the Seattle Seahawks, he bounced to Green Bay and then Chicago, and then he was out of the league altogether in 2022. And you have to admit, he had quite an impressive career for himself. I mean, this was a man that was a third-round pick in the NFL. He originally was a basketball player, so football wasn't supposed to be his main thing. And by the end of 2021, he would have left the NFL with $82 million made. Not a small chunk of change by any means at all whatsoever. So you would imagine that after the 2021 season, Jimmy Graham would ride off into the sunset and he would call it a career for himself. That's where you're wrong. So Jimmy Graham would not play any NFL football during the 2022 season. And then we would find out that he would return to the New Orleans Saints this past offseason. Now, I want to be very crystal clear. This isn't isn't a scenario where he is signing for one day just so he could retire with the team that he experienced the most success with. He's actually attempting an NFL comeback with the New Orleans Saints. And it seems as though, unfortunately, there's been some sort of roadblock in this comeback as Jimmy Graham was arrested on Friday night. So here's how the story goes. According to TMZ Sports, Jimmy Graham's NFL comeback has hit a roadblock. The New Orleans Saints tight end was arrested on suspicion of being under the influence of a controlled substance Friday night, after cops say that they saw him wandering in traffic. TMZ Sports has learned that law enforcement responded to a call for a suspicious person acting erratically near a Southern California resort. At the scene, cops claimed that they witnessed Jimmy Graham walking in the streets and they attempted to arrest him, but he resisted. The 36-year-old was eventually taken into custody for suspicion of being under the influence of a controlled substance and resisting, delaying, and obstructing a police officer, both misdemeanors. Jimmy Graham has since been released and the incident is currently under investigation. For those wondering why Jimmy Graham was in Southern California when he plays for the New Orleans Saints, the primary reason is the fact that the Saints were in Southern California because they had a preseason matchup versus the LA Chargers on Sunday. So Jimmy Graham being near a resort makes a lot of sense. That's probably where the Chargers were staying. And earlier on in that day, there was even this wholesome video between Jimmy Graham and Drew Brees that Graham retweeted showing Drew Brees some love. The Saints posted it saying these two, and then Jimmy Graham would quote the post saying the GOAT. So I reserve judgment, man, until we truly found out what's going on, because it seems like a very bizarre story. And eventually we found out what actually went on. Check this out. The New Orleans Saints would release a statement saying for immediate release on August 19, 2023. New Orleans Saints tight end Jimmy Graham experienced a medical episode last evening, which resulted in him being disoriented. He was taken into custody by local authorities and transported to a local hospital for evaluation for what Dr. John Amos believes to be a likely seizure and spent the night under medical supervision and testing. Amos met Graham at the hospital and is overseeing his care at this time. He was released this morning and is with the team as they continue preparations for Sunday's game against the Los Angeles Chargers. So this is good news for Jimmy Graham because originally it seemed like he had long odds to make the roster regardless. So it would have been a really bad look if this was substance related. And honestly, man, what's important is Jimmy Graham is okay. I don't necessarily know how seizures work. If anyone has ever had a seizure, can you let me know? I always imagined a seizure being you shaking a bunch and then fainting possibly. I don't know the duration of the average seizure. I didn't even think it was possible for someone to be capable of wandering into traffic as he was seizing, but maybe the seizure began as he was walking alongside traffic. I'm not necessarily sure. But then at the same time, how would he be seizing long enough for the police officer to get him? Maybe the police officer was there at the time. I'm not trying to doubt what Jimmy Graham went through. I'm just trying to piece together what went down in my mind. Regardless, I'm happy Jimmy Graham's okay. I'm really happy it's not substance related, and I'm glad that he will have an opportunity to continue his comeback. I feel like the Saints handled this situation with the most grace, and they got ahead of it very quickly explaining what went down. So let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about all this, man. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.